The shocking truth. For 12 years, she carried brides. Bella was the star of hundreds of weddings in Savannah. But when she got old, they dumped her in the mountains to die. For 3 years, she fought wolves, bears, and starvation. She was on the brink of death when a miracle happened. This meeting by the creek changed 2 lives forever. Bella at the creek. Bella remembered silk and lace. She remembered the scent of lilies and roses in bridal bouquets, the chiming of bells on her harness, and the warmth of children's hands on her muzzle. For 12 years, she had carried newlyweds through the old cobblestone streets of Savannah, where Spanish moss hung from oak trees like wedding veils. Every morning, Jack, the stable owner, would braid her mane into tight plaits, weaving in white roses and satin ribbons. Her harness gleamed like jewelry, every buckle polished to a mirror shine. Bella knew her job: walk slowly, majestically, so photographers could capture every step. She was beautiful, a bay mare with a white star on her forehead and 4 white socks on her hooves. Tourists would stop to take pictures with her. Children would reach out tiny hands to pet her velvet muzzle. Brides would whisper secrets to her, while grooms helped them climb into the carriage. "She brings good luck," Jack would tell young couples. "Bella has been to 1,000 weddings, and all those couples are still happy." Bella didn't know if this was true, but she could feel the bride's excitement, their trembling hands as they adjusted their dresses in the carriage. She could sense how important each of her steps was on this special day. In spring, she carried lovers beneath blooming magnolias. In summer, through parks where cicadas sang. In autumn, the road was carpeted with golden leaves that rustled under her hooves. In winter, warm blankets lay in the carriage, and the horse's breath turned into white clouds. Bella knew every cobblestone on her route. She knew where the road got steeper, where to slow down at turns. She knew the sound of newlyweds' laughter behind her and felt their happiness as her own. But time moved on, relentless and quiet. First, Bella began stumbling on turns. Hooves that once knew every stone now sometimes missed their mark. Her breathing became heavy after climbs that used to come easily. Her back began to ache from the weight of the carriage. Jack initially blamed it on hot weather, on fatigue. But then young horses appeared in the stable, a red stallion named Fire and a black mare named Midnight. They were faster, younger, more beautiful. Their hooves knew no fatigue. Their breathing didn't falter on hills. Bella began working less frequently, first every other day, then every 2 days. Then only on weekends. She would stand in her stall and watch as Fire and Midnight left with the brides who used to be her brides. Jack avoided her gaze. He knew that she knew. "Bella's done her time," she heard his voice one evening when he was talking on the phone. 12 years of service. That's a lot for a working horse. I'll sell her for meat before prices drop completely." Bella stood in her stall and listened. She didn't understand all the words, but she knew the tone. It was the tone of farewell. But the butcher never came. Instead, one morning, an old trailer pulled up to the stable. Bella didn't resist when they led her up the ramp. She only turned back to look at the stable one last time. At the stall where she had lived for 12 years. At the pasture where she grazed in the evenings. At Jack, who wouldn't meet her eyes. The trailer drove for hours. Bella didn't know where they were taking her. She thought about the white roses in her mane, about the bride's laughter, about Savannah's cobblestone streets. She thought about the home she was leaving forever. The trailer stopped somewhere in the hills of North Georgia. There were no cobblestone roads or wedding carriages here. There were only endless hills, covered with pines and streams running between rocks. It was as quiet as a desert. Bella stepped out of the trailer and looked around. The grass was coarse, not soft like the pasture by the stable. The air smelled of pine and something wild, unfamiliar. In the distance, a coyote howled. The trailer drove away without looking back. Bella didn't sleep the first night. She stood under a large oak tree, shivering from cold and fear. She didn't know what wilderness was. She didn't know that wolves and coyotes hunt at night. She didn't know that rain here could fall for weeks, and in winter, snow would reach her belly. Bella's adventures in the hills of North Georgia. First story, the first winter. Snow trap. December came early that first year. Bella didn't know what a real mountain winter was like. In Savannah, snow fell rarely and melted within a day. Here, the sky was covered with leaden clouds, and the air began to bite with frost. When the snowfall began, Bella was initially happy. The white flakes reminded her of confetti at weddings. But the snow fell for 3 days without stopping. First it covered the grass with a thin layer, then rose to her hooves, then to her hocks. Bella didn't know what to do. All her life, hay had been brought to her stall in winter, and now she stood in the middle of a snow-covered meadow, not understanding where to look for food. She tried to paw through the snow with her hooves, but underneath was only frozen ground. On the 3rd day of the blizzard, Bella found a small cave in the rocks. She huddled inside, shivering from cold and hunger. The snow kept falling, and the cave entrance was gradually being buried. Bella realized she might become trapped. Panic seized her. She rushed to the exit, but the snow was already chest-deep. Every step was difficult. Bella would sink down, get up, sink down again. Her breath turned into white clouds. Her heart beat so fast she was afraid it would burst. Hours dragged like years. Bella pressed against the cave wall, trying to warm herself. She thought about her warm stall, about hay, about how she would have been willing to work every day, just to not freeze here alone. When the snow finally stopped, Bella struggled to dig a tunnel to the exit. She was so weak she could barely stand. But she made it out. Second story, encounter with a wolf pack. Night of the Hunters. This happened in the spring of the 2nd year. Bella had already learned to forage, knew where to find water, but still didn't understand the laws of the wild. She didn't know that spring is when predators emerge from winter shelters, hungry and aggressive. Bella was grazing in a small valley where particularly lush grass grew. She was so focused on eating that she didn't notice how suspiciously quiet everything had become around her. Birds stopped singing. Even the crickets fell silent. She saw the first wolf out of the corner of her eye, a gray shadow slipping between the trees. Bella raised her head, but the wolf disappeared. She continued eating, but now looked around every few seconds. Then a second wolf appeared, then a third. They didn't attack, just watched. Bella realized she was trapped. The valley was surrounded by steep slopes, and the wolves had blocked the only exit. The pack consisted of 5 adult wolves. The leader was huge, with yellow eyes and a scar on his muzzle. He was in no hurry. They knew the horse would tire faster than they would. Bella tried to break through. She rushed toward the valley exit, but the wolves closed the circle. One of them jumped on her back but slipped off. The chase continued all night. The wolves attacked in turns to avoid getting tired. Bella ran in circles around the valley, fighting back with her hind hooves. Several times she fell from exhaustion, but forced herself to get up. By dawn, both the horse and the wolves were exhausted. Bella stood in the center of the valley, surrounded by predators, understanding this was the end. Her legs were shaking, her breathing was labored. She had almost no strength left. But then came the roar of a bear. A large brown bear was descending the slope. displeased that someone had organized a hunt on his territory. The wolves knew better than to tangle with a bear. They retreated, dissolving into the forest as silently as they had appeared. Bella and the bear looked at each other. The bear snorted, showing he wasn't interested in an old horse, and left. Bella was alone, but alive. Third story, the flood. When the river rises. In the summer of the second year, something happened that locals called a wall of water. Rain had been pouring for a week without stopping, and all the streams in the hills turned into raging torrents. Bella didn't understand the danger. In Savannah, she had only seen calm rivers and park ponds. She was grazing in a lowland next to the very stream where she would later meet Evan. The water in the stream was rising, but slowly, and Bella paid no attention. She didn't know that upstream, an old mill dam was failing under pressure. When the dam burst, Bella heard a strange sound, like a train rolling down the mountain. She raised her head and saw a wall of water, as tall as a person, rushing down the valley, sweeping away everything in its path. Bella bolted, but the water was faster. The current caught her and carried her downstream. Bella tried to swim, but the current was too strong. She was battered against rocks, spun in whirlpools, dragged underwater. She thought she would drown. Water filled her nostrils, eyes, ears. Bella saw uprooted trees, fence debris, dead animals floating by. She realized she could become one of them. But survival instinct was stronger. Bella saw a large tree that had fallen across the current and swam toward it with all her strength. She managed to grab onto the trunk, but the current tried to tear her away. She held on until she felt her muscles failing. Finally, the current began to subside. Bella was able to reach the shore, but was so weak she could barely stand. She was covered in mud, cut by stones, her lungs burned from the water she had swallowed. For 3 days, she lay on the high bank, recovering. She had no appetite. Water made her nauseous. But she survived. Fourth story, illness, when the body fails. In the fall of the second year, what Bella feared most happened to her. She got sick. It started with a cold. She got soaked in the rain and couldn't find shelter. Then her temperature rose, and she developed a cough. Under normal circumstances, a veterinarian would have given her antibiotics, provided warmth and rest. Here, she was on her own. Bella understood that if she couldn't overcome the illness, she would die. She instinctively searched for medicinal herbs that might help. She watched wild animals treat themselves with willow bark and echinacea leaves, but she didn't know exactly what she needed. The cough worsened, breathing became difficult. Bella moved with difficulty, constantly looking for places where she could lie down and rest. She understood she was growing weaker each day. The most frightening thing was loneliness. When you're sick, you need someone to be there. Bella remembered how in the stable, other horses would approach a sick one, just stand nearby. Here, she was alone with her illness. She found a small cave and didn't leave it for 3 days. She lay on her side, shivering with fever, thinking that no one would know if she died. Her bones would simply be covered by leaves, and within a year, there would be no trace left. But on the 4th day, the fever broke. Bella was able to get up, able to go to the stream and drink. She was very weak, but alive. Her body had managed on its own, as wild animals have for centuries. Old Evan found her by the creek in June, 3 years after she had been brought to the hills. Bella was drinking water, and sunlight played on her back, where scars from thorns and traces of harsh winters were visible. She was thin, but strong. Wild, but not broken. Evan was riding his old horse Charlie, checking the boundaries of his small ranch. He had been a cowboy all his life, but now, at 70, he worked more slowly, observed more than acted. His wife had died 2 years ago. His children had moved to cities, and he remained alone on the ranch with a few cows and old Charlie. When he saw Bella, he first thought it was a mirage. A beautiful bay horse by a creek in his area, where wild horses hadn't been seen for half a century. But Bella was real. She raised her head and looked at him. There was no fear in her eyes, only fatigue and something else. Something that made Evan stop and freeze. He had seen this look before, in the eyes of old horses that had seen much in their lifetime. "Hello, beautiful," he said quietly, removing his worn cowboy hat. "Where did you come from?" Bella didn't run away. She stood looking at this man with a gray beard and kind eyes, at hands that reached out slowly, without haste, at a face that promised no pain. Evan dismounted and came closer. He could see the horse had been domesticated. Despite her wild appearance, there was training in her movements. He saw the scars on her body, saw how she had survived in these hills. "Someone abandoned you here, didn't they?" he asked, and Bella nodded as if she understood. Evan extended his hand, and Bella, after long consideration, allowed him to touch her muzzle. His palm was warm and rough, like all people who had worked with animals their whole lives. "Do you want to go home?" he asked. Bella didn't know what home was. The stable in Savannah had been work. The hills had been survival. But something in this man's voice told her that home was something different. Evan didn't rush. He sat on a rock by the creek and waited. Bella grazed nearby but didn't leave. She felt something new in this man's presence, something that Jack, who was always hurrying, didn't have. Something called patience. "My name is Evan," he said. "What's your name?" Bella couldn't answer, but she came closer. Evan pulled a piece of sugar from his pocket, a habit of old cowboys who always carried something tasty for horses. "If you want, you can come with me," he said. "I have a stall, hay and oats, and time, plenty of time." Bella looked at him, then at Charlie, who waited patiently, then at the hills that had been her home for 3 years, and she took a step toward Evan. The journey to the ranch took 2 hours. Bella walked beside Charlie while Evan led the horse by the reins. He didn't hurry, stopped when Bella wanted to drink or rest. He told her about his ranch, about the cows, about how his wife Mary had died. "She loved horses," he said. "Always said a horse isn't just an animal, it's a friend." The ranch turned out to be small but cozy. An old house, a barn, a pen for cows, and a stable with 3 stalls. Everything was old but sturdy and clean. Evan led Bella to the middle stall, where fresh straw was already prepared. "This is your place now," he said, "if you want to stay." Bella wasn't sure. She was used to the freedom of the hills, to no one commanding her. But the hay smelled sweet, the water was clean, and in the corner of the stall stood a bowl of oats. Evan didn't lock the stall door. He knew that trust cannot be taken by force. It can only be earned. For the first week, Bella only came to the stable to eat. The rest of the time she spent in the pen, ready to run at the first sign of danger. Evan didn't impose himself. He simply came morning and evening, brought hay and oats, said a few words, and left. But gradually Bella began to stay longer. First for a few minutes after eating, then for an hour, then for the whole night. Evan never rushed her, never forced her. He was simply there when she needed him. Evan wasn't rich. His ranch was small, and his house was old. The roof leaked in 2 places, the fence needed painting, and the truck was older than Evan himself. But he had oats, hay, and most importantly, time and patience. After a month, Bella let Evan groom her mane. He did it slowly, carefully, untangling knots and removing burrs. Bella would close her eyes and remember how Jack once braided her hair. But this was different. Jack had been in a hurry. He had work to do. Evan wasn't in a hurry. He had only her. "You're beautiful," he would say, brushing her mane. "I bet you used to be a star." Bella didn't know what star meant, but there was no pity in Evan's voice. There was respect. There was understanding that she had been through a lot. In the fall, Bella began to work, not because she was forced to, but because she wanted to. She helped Evan gather cattle, carried small loads, hauled hay. This was completely different work, not for beauty, but for usefulness, not for strangers, but for family, because Evan had become her family. They understood each other without words. Evan knew when Bella was tired, when she was sad, when she wanted to be alone. Bella knew when Evan's joints ached, when he missed his wife, when he needed company. In the evenings they would sit together, the old cowboy on the porch, the old horse by the fence. They would watch the sunset and stay quiet. Sometimes Evan would play old songs on his harmonica, and Bella would listen, gently swaying her head to the beat. "You know," Evan said one day, "I think Mary sent you to me. She didn't want me to be alone." Bella raised her head and looked at him. There was no longer fatigue in her eyes. There was something new, something that could be called happiness. In winter, Bella no longer froze. She had a warm stall full of hay. She had Evan, who came to say good morning every morning and wished her good night every evening. She had a purpose, helping the old cowboy who had given her a second chance. Bella remembered silk and lace. She remembered white roses in her mane and the laughter of brides. But here, in the silence of the hills, next to a man who demanded nothing from her except that she be herself, she finally understood what it meant to be needed, not for beauty, not for work, but simply for who you are. In spring, a young mare named Star came to the ranch. Evan bought her at auction because she too was unwanted, too old for racing, too nervous for work. Bella greeted the newcomer without jealousy. She knew what it meant to be rejected, knew what a second chance meant. "Now there are two of you," Evan said, looking at the horses, "two stars on one ranch." Bella showed Star where the best grass was, where the clean water was, where to shelter from rain. She became for the young mare what someone could have once been for her, an older sister, protector, friend. Evan found an old brand on Bella's neck, the number of a wedding stable in Savannah. He could have called, found out who this horse was before she ended up in the hills, but he didn't. Some finds don't need to be returned. Some stories should begin anew. "Your old life is over," he told Bella, stroking the star on her forehead. "Now you have a new one." And Bella agreed. She no longer looked at the sunset remembering Savannah. She looked at the sunrise, thinking about a new day next to Evan, next to Star, next to the family she had found in these hills. Tourists no longer asked to be photographed with her. Children no longer reached out to pet her muzzle. Brides no longer whispered secrets to her. But every morning, Evan brought her oats and said, "Good morning, beautiful. How are you doing?" And Bella understood there was no better way to start the day. She no longer carried carriages. She was no longer a wedding star. She was simply Bella, a horse who found home where she least expected to find it. In the silence of the hills, next to a man who understood that love is not possession, but liberation. Not use, but acceptance. Not demanding beauty, but seeing beauty in what is. Sometimes when the wind blows from the south, Bella smells magnolias and remembers white roses, but she no longer feels sad. She knows that every story has its chapters, and the most important ones are those written not for others, but for yourself. In the stall next to the hay lies an old photograph. Evan found it on the internet. Bella in harness, beautiful and proud, pulling a carriage with a bride. But Evan doesn't look at that horse. He looks at the one standing in the stall next to him, at the one who went through pain and found peace, at the one who learned to love again. "Is this you?" he asked, showing the photograph. And Bella nodded. Yes, it was her. But it was a different her. The one who existed before she learned what a real home was.